Hello, everybody. Here to talk about Punisher and Jessica Jones, the two Netflix shows that were officially both canceled today. I don't have a lot of time to talk because as soon as I wrap up with this, I need to start cleaning my apartment. And pro tip for people, if you want to keep a clean house or a clean apartment, just make a lot of plans to have other people, guests, in your apartment, because then you'll feel compelled to keep it clean. And that's exactly what's happening with me. I've got a friend coming to visit in a couple of days, so now I have a couple nights of organizing ahead of me. But Punisher, Jessica Jones, I'm sure that anyone who's a fan of comics heard the official announcement today that both of those shows are canceled. Punisher, which just aired its second season, will not be returning for a third season. Jessica Jones, which wrapped production on a third season, will air that third season sometime this year, and that will be the final season. Now, I don't think anybody was shocked by this news. Luke Cage and Iron Fist were canceled a few months ago. When that happened, I think all of us thought, those shows don't have a huge audience anyway, so we weren't too shocked. The second season of Luke Cage got kind of mixed reactions from the audience and from critics. Iron Fist, first season was slaughtered by critics. Second season was a slight improvement, but big audience was never there, so we weren't shocked by the cancellations. Once Daredevil was canceled, that's when I think all bets were off, and we all knew, unfortunately, that Punisher and Jessica Jones didn't stand a chance. So, no surprise there, not much of a reaction to the news on its own. The thing, though, that does bother me about these announcements, it's just how disingenuous the announcements feel, mostly on the Netflix side. It almost feels like total disrespect to the audiences that are huge fans of this show. The example is in the press release around Jessica Jones, or in the announcement around Jessica Jones. They cancel Punisher, and then they get to Jessica Jones, and they say, and then upon further review of Marvel programming on Netflix, we decided that this will be the final season of Jessica Jones. The way it's phrased makes it sound like they canceled Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Daredevil, Punisher. They canceled all these shows, and then they decided, well, what about Jessica Jones? Let's do some review. Let's look over our programming. Yeah, I think we'll end that as well. We all know that a decision was made to cancel all of the Marvel Netflix shows. We all know it, but Netflix continues to pretend like each of these were individual decisions. They, for one reason or another, decided to cancel Iron Fist. Then, separate from that, they decided to cancel Luke Cage. I kind of wish they would just be upfront with the audience and say, Netflix is done with the Marvel partnership. We're going to, it was great few years, great programming. We're going to end it, and, thank you all for watching. They don't have to get into the details of why. I know there's a lot of politics there for why they're canceling these shows, right? The theory is that Disney is starting their own streaming platform, so Netflix doesn't want to air Marvel content. That's essentially going to be free advertising to say, hey, if you want more of this stuff, if you love Daredevil, well, check out these shows on Disney's streaming platform. So I get it. It makes sense, and you don't necessarily want to say that publicly. You don't want to get into the corporate politics, but at least show a little bit more respect for your fans. Now, that's how Netflix is handling it. You flip over to the Marvel side. Jeff Loeb, the head of Marvel Television, he's actually been talking about all of this as if he's very open to bringing the shows back. And I said it when I talked about Punisher Season 2, that I would not be at all shocked. In fact, I'm expecting these shows to come back in some way, shape, or form. With every cancellation, each announcement on the Marvel side has ended with a tease, something along the lines of, we look forward to telling more stories about Daredevil in the future, things like that. But he's been getting, I think, a little bit more explicit around that. There was an interview the other day, I don't know if it was an interview or some kind of a presentation where people were allowed to ask questions, but somebody asked Jeff Loeb if there's a chance these shows will return to Disney in some way. And he said, I wouldn't be surprised if these shows came back. Paraphrasing, but he said that it'll depend on the availability of the cast, crew, production, etc. Which I thought that was actually a great answer, a better answer than what we've seen in the past. Previously, when all these announcements were made and Disney teased the future of these characters, you can look forward to more stories with Daredevil in the future. A lot of people interpreted that as Disney will tell more of these stories, but it's more likely to be a reboot than a continuation, meaning Daredevil will come back, but new actor, new writers, etc. That's a lot of what I heard people saying, but Jeff Loeb's latest comments when he says it'll depend on availability of cast, crew, etc., to me makes it sound like, at a minimum, if these shows come back, it will be Disney's preference to bring back the same group of people and continue the storylines from where we left off on Netflix. Doesn't guarantee it'll happen. At the end of the day, these actors, these writers aren't going to just sit around for 2 years and wait for the shows to come back. They're going to go on. They're going to have other commitments. And one comment there on the 2 years comment, the reason I say wait around for 2 years is because the rumor is that the deal between Netflix and Marvel states that once the shows are canceled, these characters cannot be reappropriated by Disney and used in any other shows or movies or anything until 2 years have gone by. So that would say, Daredevil was canceled at the end of 2018. We cannot see a Disney-produced Daredevil show until 2020. So that's where the 2 years comment comes from. Now, I'll say that in terms of actor availability, I don't see that being a huge issue for Marvel down the road if they decide to bring these shows back. Because I don't think any of these shows have a huge cast. Where it's not like Arrested Development coming back, where you've got a dozen cast members, where you really need all of them. When it comes down to it for Daredevil, you need Matt Murdock, you need Karen Page, you need Foggy, maybe Kingpin. I feel like if you've got those four, even if you've got 3 out of those 4, you could make the show work. And right now, every series goes 13 episodes. One of the biggest criticisms of the Marvel Netflix shows is that there are too many episodes. So hopefully, if Disney brings them back, they'll take a lesson from that and shorten the seasons. Should improve the quality of the show, tighter storytelling, and on top of that, it would be a smaller commitment for the actors and for the crew. So I don't see that being a roadblock to bringing these shows back. I think it'll just come down to economics if Disney decides that it makes sense economically to bring these shows back. And I don't know the numbers in any kind of detail, but based off of what I see and the commentary from the articles I've read, it seems like a no-brainer that it does make sense to bring these shows back, even if you have to wait a couple of years. Now, the other thing I've heard that people throw out there as a roadblock to these shows coming back is they're very mature shows. They're rated TV MA. There's a lot of R-rated violence in these shows, especially Punisher and Daredevil, but honestly across the board. And Disney's been pretty upfront in saying that their streaming platform, Disney Plus, will be family-oriented. Nobody expects them to carry a mature show like Daredevil on the Disney streaming platform. So people have said those shows aren't going to come back. Or if they do, they'll be sanitized, they'll be made more family-friendly, which would not work for Punisher, as we all know. But if the deal goes through with Fox, where Disney is acquiring Fox, then Disney will have a majority ownership of Hulu. So people have theorized that the more mature Marvel shows could have a home on Hulu. And we've already seen some pretty recent examples of that. Howard the Duck, a new animated series, is going to be created by Marvel and will air on Hulu. Not just Howard the Duck, but I mentioned this the other day, there are going to be 4 mature, adult-oriented animated Marvel series, one of which is Howard the Duck from Kevin Smith, and then 3 other shows that I keep forgetting what they actually are. But the 4 of them are going to air seasons on Hulu, and they're all going to come together in an animated limited series called The Offenders. Clearly a kind of poking fun at the Defenders. But if you can do that on Hulu, these more adult-oriented, mature shows, very similar to what they did with the Defenders on Netflix, and that says to me that there's a model for this. right? If Disney decides to bring the shows back, they can do it in an unsanitized way. They can put their more mature content on Hulu and keep the family-friendly, the family friendliness of their Disney Plus streaming platform going just fine. And I think that's how they do it in the comics, right? In the comic book world, they'll have various lines of comics. So for Marvel, you've got your Marvel comics, and that's where it'll be at most PG-13. And then you had the Marvel Max line of comics, and that's where Punisher was really able to be Punisher in the Garth Ennis run, where you had basically R-rated comics. So having multiple distribution methods, each branded in their own way, from Marvel, one geared more towards kids, teenagers, one geared more towards adults. That's how they do it in the comics, and I don't see any reason why they can't do it with television and film as well. And that's one more thing I'll mention. On the film side of the world, I would love to see that kind of model done for film as well. And I think DC's starting to try that out. If you look at DC, they have their DCEU films. That's the Justice League, that's Batman v Superman, all those DC films that take place in that shared universe. It would be great if they had another brand for some of the more mature DC stories. And they're kind of trying that out with the new Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. Now, I don't think it's going to be an R-rated film. I don't even know if they've talked about potentially making it R-rated, but the point is that they're going to be releasing a DC film with a well-known DC character that's going to have some kind of different branding to make it clear to audiences that this is a story which takes place outside of the Justice League DCEU continuity that you're used to. So I hope that Joker movie is successful. So it tells DC, and therefore it tells Marvel, that, hey, you can get a little bit more creative. You can tell stories outside of your mainstream continuity, and audiences will understand it. If they can figure out a way to do some slightly different branding for these other stories, I think there's probably some fear that audiences won't get it, right? They'll walk into the Joker movie and wonder what this has to do with the last Batman movie they saw, the last Justice League movie they saw. But if they can, and I think comic book fans understand that. Comic book fans are used to multiple continuities. It's really the mainstream audiences that have to get used to that. So this Joker film will be a good test, a good experiment for that. And if it works, it would be great if we could get to the point where both Marvel and DC feel comfortable using some alternative branding to release stories outside of the normal continuity, and maybe they can apply that to some of the more mature storytelling as well. If we could get an R-rated Punisher film one day from Marvel, that would be cool. And not have to worry about parents thinking, oh, Marvel, this is another Avengers kind of movie. I can bring my 4-year-old to this. So hopefully we're heading in that direction. Anyway, the bottom line on the news for today with these latest round of cancellations, none of us were surprised by it. I definitely wasn't surprised, was totally expecting it. Rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, the way they're handling it, the way they're announcing it, but that doesn't really matter. What really matters is, are they going to bring these shows back? And if they do, is it going to be following from the story that we left off on in Netflix? And personally, I think the answer is yes to both of those. I think the shows will come back. At least Daredevil will come back. I don't know if all the shows will return, but I think these characters will come back, and I hope that they do. Oh, one last thing I'll say is that if they come back on Hulu, I'd like them to take another stab at the Defenders miniseries. I don't think Netflix really did it justice. And if we're not getting all the shows back, like let's say they only resurrect Daredevil, but they don't bring Luke Cage back, they don't bring Iron Fist back, maybe they don't bring back the Punisher. A great way to bring back those characters without full-fledged renewing the shows would be through a Defenders crossover. Kind of similar to the Hulk. The Hulk doesn't get his own solo films, but he shows up in every Avengers movie, and he showed up in the Thor movie. So I'd love to see more crossover between the shows, maybe another stab at the Defenders, if only so we can bring all the characters back, not just the ones that had higher viewership, right? A lot more people watched Daredevil than Iron Fist. A lot more people watch Daredevil than Punisher, but I want all the characters back. So here's hoping, and we'll keep an eye on this as it develops. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. I'm going to go clean my room.